Hi, my name is Moaz. I'm one of the co-founders of Odoo Dashboards. In this video, I'm going to be giving you an overview of Odoo Dashboards and how to go about building your first dashboards and reports. Any dashboard report in Odoo Dashboards begins with building a dataset. Odoo Dashboards defines a dataset as a set of different fields coming from a model in Odoo. So for instance, if we wanted to look at sales or invoices or CRM, we would go into the appropriate model from the system. So for instance, sales order or payments or journal item. And then we pick fields on top of these models to build a reusable data set. So let's go ahead and create our first data set. So go ahead and click on new data set and then search for any model that you would like to analyze. So for instance, we will go ahead and look up the sales order model. So I can select this, I can call it SO MOS and create data set. So when we create a fresh data set, we have the ID field added automatically to the data set. And then here we can see a list of all the fields that are available on the sales order dataset. So like many to one fields, date fields, selection, Boolean, floats, so on and so forth. And then on the left, you can see currently that we have only the ID field in our dataset. And our dataset has 10 sample rows showing by default. And here we can also see that we have around 18,000 sales orders in the system. So let's go ahead and start adding fields to our dataset. So I can look up the date field. I can grab the customer. Now, customer, bear in mind, is a relational field on the sales order. So I could grab the customer ID like this. And what I could also do is go within the customer and grab the name of this customer, right? And then what I can also do is within the customer, I can, for instance, go into their country. Maybe I want to look at my sales based on different states or different regions, right? So I need that information as well. So I can go into the country and look up the country name. So, and I can just come back to the sales order. Now let me get the amount and let me get the state of the sale order. So I can just click on insert. And now these fields are inserted, ready to be saved into our dataset. So let me go ahead and save. These fields have been added to our dataset. So now if you take another look at the sample data, we can see in one normalized table, we have the date, the customer ID, the customer's name, their country, their sales for that particular sales order, and the state of the sales order. And now we can see that some of these column names are a bit confusing. So like partner ID name, partner ID country name, right? So let's go ahead and make those easier to understand so that we can easily reference them when we're building the dashboard. So for instance, I can call this customer ID, customer name, and customer country. And I can go ahead and click on Save All Changes. So now I have this really nice data set with information coming from relational tables into one single table, which we call a data set. So it's pretty simple. So now the next step after building a data set is to build reporting on top of it. So I can go ahead and click on configurations and go to the dashboard builder. So once you're in the dashboard builder, click on new dashboard and let's build a sales analysis dashboard. So let me call this my sales analysis. Create dashboard. So once we're in the dashboard builder, we have this option of creating items, right? So every item corresponds to an analytic in our dashboard. So for instance, I can click on create first item. So let's say I want to look at total sales. So here what I can do is I can select from one of these visualization types, so tile, sticky note, bar charts, and all of these. And what I can do is I can click on the data source. So these data sources are what we are actually creating in the system. So for instance, I can look up the data source which I just built, and I can go to configuration and I can say give me the sum of the amount untaxed, and maybe I want to put a currency symbol on it. So I can go ahead and save. So across those 16,000 records, you can see that we have 165 million in sales. Maybe we wanted to look this with a 1,000 separator instead of shown with the suffix. So let's go ahead and add more stuff. So let me click on create new item. And let's say we wanted to look at the top 10 customers, right? So top 10 customers, usually a horizontal bar chart is pretty good for that. And we can select the same data set that we just built. And then in the configuration, we can say that we want to look at the customer name in our dimension. We want to look at their untaxed sale. And what we want to do is we want to order it by descending so that we get the topmost customers at the top of our data. And then what we can do is limit that by 10. So that gives us the top 10 from that data set. So if I go ahead and click on save and preview, so here I can see my top 10 customers and their respective sales. Let's actually look at this dashboard. So let's click on view dashboard. And here we are able to sort of see that our dashboard is coming along pretty well so far. So we have this tile, which shows our total sales, and then we have the top 10 customers, which is looking a bit small. So maybe what I can do is I can just drag it. So by unlocking the layout from here, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. And maybe I want this a bit bigger also, and I can just save that. So that looks pretty good. But then let's say now I want to look at sales for specific customers, and I want to look at sales for a subset of customers at certain dates. So we want to be able to apply filters on these components. So how can we do that? So let's go back to the dashboard. So if I head over to the tiles and click on filter, let me go ahead and add a customer filter on this. So customer, and we want to be filtering by customer name. And then we want the filter to be equal to whatever we select. So we can change this operation if you like. And I will click on show in dashboard. And then similarly, I will add a date filter. And let's say by default, I want to just look at the current year data. So I'll select the this year operation and I'll say show in dashboard. And just before I save this, I will call this total sales current year. Let me go ahead and save. So let's go back to the dashboard and click on refresh. So now we see that this icon appears. So if I click on it, I can see that I have this option to apply a date or customer filter. So let's say I wanted to look at sales for the month of June up till July for some particular customer. So let's say I want to look at just these 4 customers and maybe also Deco Addict. And then let's click on apply. So now I can see that the data has updated in the tile and I'm only getting sales for those particular customers. Similarly, we can do the same in our chart. So let's go ahead and add those filters to our chart. So filters, give the filter a human readable name, select the field, select the operation, click on show in dashboard. We can also apply default filters. So for instance, let me just add this date filter and make that current year. And let's say by default, I want the state to not equal to cancel, okay? And then what I also want is I want a state filter that I can just use on the dashboard, right? So let me go ahead and save and go back to the dashboard and click on refresh. So now on this top 10 customers chart, I have 3 filters. So either I can filter by date, state, or customer. So we put a default filter of not bringing cancel records onto the chart. And here we have this state filter. So maybe if I just wanted to look at draft or sale entries for some particular customers, I can apply the filter and the data updates accordingly. So this is pretty good. So we're starting to sort of build this functionality that is not very easily buildable through standard Odoo reporting or external modules. So now let's say I want to be able to filter on this data globally. So I don't want to apply a customer filter here or apply a customer filter here. I want to apply it so that it applies to everything. So I can just go back to the dashboard and click on this global filter icon. And here I can select that I want a customer filter and a date filter, and I can go ahead and save. So if I come back here and refresh, so now I have the customer filter available globally. So if I click on customer, let's say I select Greenfield Produce and RF, and if I go ahead and click on apply, so now my entire dashboard is just representing those two customers, and maybe now I want to apply a date on top of it. So these features make it pretty easy to go about digging in your data and then applying specific filters to answer specific problems that businesses have on a daily basis. And now if I wanted to enhance some of these numbers, right? So maybe I want to look at the min-max averages across different things. So we can enable that for both charts and tiles. So if I go ahead and open up the general tab, I can click on show metrics on these tiles, save. And if I come back, I should be able to refresh and see my count, min, max, average across all sort of customers. Maybe if I wanted to look at for one particular customer what their count of orders, min, max, averages. So I'm looking at 4 sort of different metrics through just one tile. So that's a lot of useful information. And then maybe what I also want to do is be able to drill down on my data. So I can go ahead and click on drill down options and enable drill down on the ID field. And I could do the same for my chart. Now let me go ahead and refresh. So now let's say I applied specific filters. So maybe these customers and then just state of cancel. And I click on apply. Obviously we set a cancel default filter, so that's a good sign. Maybe let's go to draft and sale. So now if I go ahead and click on this record, I go to the underlying data, which is telling me exactly the same thing. And this can be done for tiles, for charts. And then obviously if you don't want to go into the list view, you can have the drill down show up as a model, so you don't have to come back to the dashboard each time. And similarly, this is the icon for the tile for performing a drill down. So now we just visualize data from the system in different representations. So let's now look at examples where we can actually modify the data, perform our calculations, which otherwise would probably require some development or building customized fields. So let's go ahead and build a sales orders table, sales orders. And then let's click on the table type and select the same data source that we just built. And in the configuration section, we can just go ahead and add our columns. So I can add the ID, I can add the date, the customer name, country, and their amount. And I can also add the state. I'll just get rid of the ID column and let me go ahead and save. So let's go ahead and visualize the table in our dashboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make these a bit small. And I'm going to bring the table. Okay, so now in this table, we can see that we have all our 18,000 sales orders fetched very easily. And now what we can do is, let's say we wanted to look at all these sales orders and maybe group them by customer, right? So we can either do it by default so that when the data loads, the data is already grouped, or once we have the data, we can perform operations on top of it directly from the dashboard. So let me untoggle this date column for a bit. And then what I can do is maybe I want to look at sales by country. So here we can see that we have sales by country. And then what we can do is maybe sales by country per customer, right? So if I go into United States, I can see my sales broken down by different customers. Maybe I'll just hide state for a bit. So we can see that Wilson Petty has 367,000, Grandeur Tech has this sale, and so on and so forth. So, and if I wanted, I could just export this data into a PDF. And yeah, so I can either export that into Excel or PDF. So that's pretty good. So let me get rid of these groupings. And now what I can do is I can add a field in which I sort of perform a calculation, right? So for instance, if I add a new field and I click on this custom icon, I can say, give me the tax amount. Okay, so let's say we wanted to compute the tax amount. So I can select the amount in our expression and I can multiply it by, for instance, 0.15. So just get the 15%, right? And then click on apply and click on save. So let me just move that up and let me refresh our dashboard. So now in our table, we can see that we are getting this information, this tax amount information from a column which does not exist in Odoo, but we're able to sort of perform a calculation on top of existing columns to build sort of new computed data directly in the dashboard. And now I can just export this, get it into Excel or show it in a presentation, whatever it may be, just so that if I have some complex reports that I'm going into Excel for, I can just create them once in the dashboard and just export the data, apply my filter. So the filters work exactly the same on all items. So maybe I want to look at a specific customer at a specific date, in a specific region. I can do that pretty easily. And now let's add some conditional columns in this table so that maybe I want to split my customers into customers that have orders or sale more than, let's say, a specific amount, and then just the less ones grouped into a separate bucket. So let's go back to the dashboard builder. And here what I'm going to do is add a new column. And in this column, what I can do is click on customer classification. And then in the condition, I can say that when the amount of a particular customer is, order classification, because we are looking at individual sales orders. So I can say when the amount of a particular order is greater than 1,000. Let me just look at the data. So yeah, I guess that's a good number. So when it's greater than 1,000, classify that as a big order. Else, call it a small order. So let me click on apply and save. So now I have this column called order classification, classifying orders into either small or big. So I can just click on this group by and click on order classification. So now I can see I have 14,000 small orders with 4,500 big orders. So it's obviously a trivial example, but it can be, this concept can be used to do much more complex operations. And I have this totals section where I can just summarize everything and see a total. So this is especially useful when we're applying filters and we want to look at the totals across numeric columns. And one thing which I don't like about this table is this date format. So that is also something that which we can easily change. So if I just go into custom, I can call this date, and in format, I can select the date field and I can say format it into this pattern. So go ahead and save. So now we can see that the date is appearing much nicely. So let's say we wanted to see grouped data. So let me just go ahead and duplicate this table for a second. Let me call this sales orders sales by customer. And in the configuration, what I can do is get rid of the date, get the customer, their country, their amount. And what I can do is, in this table, I want to see all the sales summed up and averaged across customers, right? So what I can do is go into a custom field called sales, and I can wrap the expression in a sum and get their sales. And then if I want to get their average order value, I can do an average across their sales. And what I need to do is group this data by the customer name and the customer country. So let's say if I don't put customer country and save this. So it's telling me that I need to add the customer country because we are aggregating some columns, so we need to group what's left. So I can call this customer country. So let's go ahead and visualize that on the dashboard. So let me just expand this a bit. So here we can see that now this data has 180 rows. So when we were looking at all the sales orders, those were 18,610 rows. Now we've grouped all those rows by customer, right? Already as we are fetching them. And now we can see that across 180 customers, we have these different sums of sales. And maybe if I want to group this by country, so I can look at it by country, view a summary of it, and so on. So now I have this sales analysis dashboard, which is showing me my sales orders, my top customers, the different metrics across sales, and sales grouped by the customers, their country. Now, this requires some level of product knowledge and how Odoo Dashboard works, which is sort of the purpose of this video. But then there's another way of making these dashboards across different scenarios through our AI feature. So if I go ahead and go back to the dashboard builder, I can click on AI. And what this AI feature does is we can describe our need, our data requirement, and then we can sort of go back and forth on refining the requirement and build it. So let's say I want to build that top 10 customers chart. So I can go ahead and say top 10 customers SOMOS. So the reason I'm giving it the data set myself is I have a bunch of data sets in the system. So I want to limit it to the one that we just built so that it's controlled and we can see it working across the data set that we built. So it's saying great pick, I'll build this on the SOMOS data set. Here's a horizontal bar chart of your top 10 customers. If you'd rather rank by number of orders instead of revenue, just say so. So that's a good thing. So let's say we want to do it by number of orders. So let's do number of orders since we already built the one for amount. Okay. So top 10 customers by number of orders built on SOMOS dataset. It counts sales orders per customer and shows 10 highest as a horizontal bar chart. So it's asking me if I want to limit it to confirmed orders or keep all states. So let's say I want to limit it to only sale. Okay, so now that's only sale. So let's go ahead and click on generate this visualization. Okay, so here we can see our top 10 customers by number of orders. Our AI has selected the right data source, give it a right name, and in the configuration we can see that it has the count as the metric and the dimension is the customer name, which is ordered by descending with a limit of 10 applied. And if we inspect the filters, we can see its state is equal to sale. So that's pretty good, and that saves us a lot of time. So let me create a table this time. So this time I won't give it a dataset name. I want to see sales grouped by customer and their average order value. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on enter. Okay, so it's saying that I will build this from the sales order dataset, which has customer, amount, and 1 row per order, perfect for both total sales and AOV. I'm proposing a table with 1 row per customer showing total sales and AOV of amount, sorted by total sales descending. Want me to limit to confirmed orders or include all? Actually, include all and get me data for last 40 days only. So essentially I've given it a different requirement this time, that I only want to get data for the last 40 days. So what this will do is this will build a vir operation. So my requirement is that anytime that I open up my dashboard, I just want to look at the data for the last 40 days. So if 30 days have passed, so when I look at the dashboard after 30 days, it's still going to show me for the last 40 days. So it's not like a fixed date. So it's saying that I don't have a 40 days filter. My closest existing options are 30 days or 90 days. I can either create a new 40 days operation or use one of the existing year ones. So let me just say new 40 days. And yeah. Okay, so let's look at the final plan. A sales and AOV by customer last 40 days table, which shows per customer their total sales, their average order value across all states, filtered to order date in the last 40 days. It's going to use the sales order dataset, and it's going to create a new filter operation for last 40 days. So let's click on generate this visualization. Perfect. So let's inspect the different configurations. So the name looks right. The data source is perfect. So customer name, sum of amount total, average of sales, group by customer, ordered by the average order value by descending. Awesome. And then in the filter, we can see that it has built a new operation for last 40 days, which is essentially going to show me only the last 40 days worth of data. So now if I go ahead and refresh and open up the dashboard, so bear in mind that this dashboard, every time we load it, we are essentially averaging data across 18,000 sales orders per item. So given that, it is really absolutely quick. And the reason for that is the way our architecture is set up, but that is something we're going to talk about in a later video. So these are the existing ones that we built. So these are the ones that were built by our AI. So we can see our top 10 customers, and here we can see the sales and average order value for the last 40 days. And here, if you may notice that we only have 172 rows, whereas previously we had 180. So this just tells us that in the last 40 days, we had 172 of those customers place an order with us. So if you want to try out this demo, just go to our website at OdooDashboards.com, click on this view demo button, and just put in your email. We're going to send you a link to our demo server, exactly the one that we use in this demo, and then you're going to be able to sort of build out these dashboards by yourself. So you can watch this video, follow along the steps to try and build the dashboards. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at moaz@OdooDashboards.com or sales@OdooDashboards.com. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.